Welcome to GeoWar News, your best source for deep analysis on global military developments. Today, we will dive into a recent and important statement made by President Donald Trump, who emphasized that American ships, both civilian and military, should have free access through the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. This declaration has major implications not only for global trade, but especially for military logistics and naval power projection. When discussing the world's most strategic artificial waterways, two immediately come to mind: the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. Starting with the Suez Canal, located in Egypt, this engineering marvel was inaugurated in 1869, dramatically reshaping global trade by creating a direct maritime link between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Before the Suez Canal, ships traveling between Europe and Asia had to make the dangerous and time-consuming voyage around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. The opening of the canal cut thousands of miles from these journeys, saving weeks of travel time, a revolutionary achievement at the time. The Suez Canal is a straight, flat passage carved across the Isthmus of Suez, ideal for rapid naval deployment. Although the United States did not participate in its construction, the canal today plays a critical role in the strategic movements of U.S. Navy ships, particularly those operating with the 5th and 6th Fleets in the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, the Panama Canal, located at the narrowest point of Central America, has a far more complicated history. Initially attempted by the French in the 1880s under the leadership of Ferdinand de Lesseps, the same engineer who oversaw the Suez Canal, the Panama project quickly turned into a disaster. Unlike the flat sands of Egypt, Panama's terrain presented brutal challenges. Mountain ranges, tropical diseases such as yellow fever and malaria, and treacherous muddy conditions made progress slow and deadly. Thousands of workers lost their lives, and the project collapsed into bankruptcy by the end of the 19th century. It was only thanks to the United States that the Panama Canal became a reality. With advanced engineering methods, large-scale sanitation efforts to combat disease, and decisive political and military intervention, American efforts culminated in the successful completion of the canal in 1914. The Panama Canal transformed global maritime logistics by providing a fast link between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This allowed the U.S. Navy to rapidly redeploy warships between theaters, a capability that remains critical even today. For most of the 20th century, the Panama Canal was under direct U.S. control, a fact that President Trump emphasizes as part of his argument. Control was only handed over to Panama in 1999, following decades of negotiation. Today, the canal is managed by the Panama Canal Authority, an independent organization that sets its own fees and operational rules. However, President Trump argues that considering America's pivotal role in constructing and defending the canal, U.S. ships, especially military vessels, should transit freely without paying any tolls. President Trump, now serving his new term in office, made these comments via a strong post on his social media platform. He stated that without the efforts and sacrifices of the United States, neither the Suez Canal nor the Panama Canal would have reached their current level of global importance. To pursue this position diplomatically, Trump tasked Secretary of State Marco Rubio with addressing the matter urgently. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz backed the president's position, saying that American taxpayers funded the completion and defense of the Panama Canal, and therefore American ships should not be burdened with transit fees. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently visited Panama City and proposed that U.S. Navy vessels should receive priority and exemption from fees at the canal. Hegseth even suggested reintroducing U.S. military forces to Panama to protect this crucial artery of global commerce, a move swiftly rejected by the Panamanian government. Turning our attention back to the Suez Canal, while American involvement in its original construction was practically non-existent, the United States plays a major role today in safeguarding the canal's maritime routes, especially against emerging threats. In recent months, the strategic stability of the Suez Canal has been heavily challenged by Houthi rebel attacks in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, following the escalation of the conflict in Gaza. These attacks have slashed the Suez Canal's revenues by over 60% in 2024, with Egyptian authorities estimating losses close to $7 billion. In response, the United States ramped up military operations, deploying advanced warships such as Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, equipped with Aegis combat systems, and aircraft from carrier strike groups to the region. Unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, reconnaissance satellites, and Navy SEAL units have been actively used to intercept threats and guarantee the safety of international navigation in the area. This surge in American military activity bolsters President Trump's argument. If the United States is heavily investing military resources to secure these vital trade arteries, then it is only fair that American ships, whether commercial or military, should transit without additional financial burden. However, historical facts must be acknowledged and carefully considered. While the United States possesses an undeniably strong historical, legal, and even moral argument regarding the Panama Canal, its claim over the Suez Canal stands on far shakier ground. The Suez Canal was conceived and built in the 19th century under the leadership of the French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps, financed heavily by French and British investors, and completed largely through European engineering expertise. At the time, the United States played no direct role in its construction, neither diplomatically, financially, nor militarily. It was an entirely European-driven project aimed at strengthening colonial trade routes between Europe and Asia. In contrast, the Panama Canal is deeply intertwined with American history. Following the failure of the French attempt in Panama, it was the United States that stepped in with decisive leadership. Through massive investment, innovative engineering breakthroughs like the lock system, and a bold military and diplomatic presence, the U.S. turned a vision into reality. The success of the Panama Canal not only revolutionized global trade, but also cemented America's rising status as a global superpower in the early 20th century. American blood, resources, and ingenuity were foundational to the canal's existence, and the U.S. maintained sovereign control over it for most of the past century, until the handover in 1999. Even today, many in Washington argue that the security of the Panama Canal remains a vital American interest. Nevertheless, despite these historical differences, the modern strategic realities of 2025 demand a broader perspective. Both the Suez and Panama Canals are absolutely essential for the economic vitality and military readiness of the United States. They form the backbone of global maritime movement, enabling rapid and efficient transit between the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. For the U.S. Navy, these canals are not merely conveniences. They are critical pillars supporting the nation's global force projection capabilities. Naval mobility through these strategic choke points allows the United States to maintain rapid response forces capable of intervening in crises across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific region. Aircraft carrier strike groups, amphibious ready groups with marine expeditionary units, fast attack submarines like those of the Virginia class, and Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers all rely on quick access to these canals to redeploy between strategic theaters without delay. In an era of rising global competition, particularly with near-peer adversaries like China and Russia, maintaining that logistical agility is not a luxury, it is a national security imperative. Additionally, the rise of asymmetric maritime threats, such as piracy, terrorist attacks on shipping, and the increasing use of unmanned maritime systems, has made secure and reliable canal access even more critical. American military planners now view canal security not just through the lens of traditional state conflicts, but also through the new realities of cyber attacks against port infrastructure and drone strikes against shipping lanes. Securing safe passage through the Suez and Panama Canals has thus become an essential part of broader homeland security and supply chain resilience strategies. The ongoing diplomatic and strategic discussions initiated by President Trump could fundamentally reshape the global maritime landscape. If the United States succeeds in securing exemptions, preferential access, or even enhanced security cooperation for its ships in both canals, it would represent a major geopolitical victory. Such a development would dramatically enhance American strategic flexibility, reduce operational transit times and costs, and allow the U.S. Navy to maintain overwhelming force readiness in multiple theaters simultaneously. It would also send a powerful signal to allies and adversaries alike that America intends to safeguard its global mobility and supply routes in an increasingly unstable world. GeoWar News will continue closely monitoring these evolving negotiations, as their outcomes could define the next era of maritime strategy and American naval dominance.